One of 9 boys, Johnny Raper rose from working class roots in the southwestern Sydney suburb of Revesby to become an Australian rugby league icon. From the Camperdown Dragons and on to Newtown, Raper would quickly make his mark and in 1959 began his sensational career as lock forward for the all-conquering St George. He was a pin-up boy, although these newsreel shots of him waking bright and early and leaving for training do stretch the imagination. He'd represented New South Wales Colts as a lock against Great Britain in 1958, but stood out of club football for the year as he made his way across to the Dragons. In 1959-60, he made the first of his 3 Kangaroo tours, scoring a try on debut at Wigan. For the next 10 years, he was a fixture and one of the biggest names on the world stage. Raper was a fitness fanatic, well ahead of his time, and while St George were trendsetters in the fitness stakes, Raper would have his own daily regime and lived up to his goal of being the fittest player in the fittest team in Sydney. Between 1959 and 1966, Raper would play in 8 successive premierships, and when he left at the end of 1969, he'd played 185 games. On the international stage, he would dominate as the Kangaroos registered a 50-12 victory over Great Britain in 1963 at Swinton. He was part of the first Australian touring team to win the Ashes in 50 years. In that whitewash, Raper had a hand in 7 tries in the first half hour and delivered the final pass in 4 of them. When Reg Gasnier broke his leg in the opening test against Great Britain on the next tour, Raper was the obvious choice to take over as skipper. There would be 24 appearances for New South Wales, 39 in Australian colours and captain in 8 of them, and 6 World Cup games. In 1985, with Clive Churchill, Reg Gasnier and Bobby Fulton, he was named one of the quartet of post-war immortals. An immaculate player, an untiring ambassador, Johnny Raper's ball-handling skills made him the best lock forward the game has ever seen. Tonight, the man they call Chook, Johnny Raper, is elevated to legend in the Sport Australia Hall of Fame. Ladies and gentlemen, Johnny Raper. We've got some gifts for you. They've forgotten the gifts. Sorry, more? I hope you've got a big suitcase. Can we get a shot? Just what you had? Johnny, I've got the vase. Come over, mate. Johnny, congratulations.
Yes.
One of 9 boys. Breakfast must have been a scrum in itself.
Well, we did it tough, and that's why I liked it. It carried on from me from when Mum and Dad. I learnt, ladies and gentlemen, to spoil the rod and spare the child. I tell you what, if Dad told us to pick something up that we dropped or Mum dropped and we never picked it up, there was the old stick right across the backside. Remember those days? God Almighty! And then I went down went down to Christian Brothers Newtown, where I went into a hard task master, a bloke called Brother Wilkes, and
more stick,
and. But tremendous, because there's one thing I liked about, the tennis players that were running around and all sorts of sports, was the amount of skills that they had. And I said, I'm going to be a master of those skills, whatever sport I play with. And I decided in rugby league, and I was lucky that I had a coach called Merv Whale, who was a mad skill fanatic, and he saw I had a little bit of ability, and took me under his wing and really emphasised about the skills of the game. I was only a little man. I was playing against big blokes, and he taught me how to tackle them around the ankles, and he taught me how to pass the ball to beat the man and score the try.
John, 2 shots in the video we put together. One of you getting out of bed in your footy gear and running off and jumping the fence to training. Can you tell us, was that set up?
Well, everything I did was set up. Even running around with a bowler hat with nothing on an Ilkley was set up too.
You told me you weren't the man in the bowler hat.
Well, I wasn't the man in the bowler hat until John Singleton got me to do a few ads for Jack's Tyres, and then I became the man in the bowler hat, didn't I?
There's quite a few people in here wouldn't understand the man in the bowler hat, but it was, 1963 in England on tour, and someone was spotted running naked down the street with just wearing a bowler hat.
Yeah, and it's, how really they make things up over there. You got no idea.
Ask Shane.
It's still too bloody cold out there. Imagine running down the street with a bowler hat and with nothing on, and with all that snow around you. My wife wouldn't let me do that anyhow.
1963, you brought home the Ashes, first time in 50 years. We looked at the vision. The conditions looked bleak, to say the least.
Yes, they were very bleak, and we went out in the field and walked out in the field, and we came back and had to change our tactics, and we did. I must say this about playing against the British side, and I played against them in the early 50s and that sort of thing, and I saw how they used the ball a lot more to beat the man, and how to conserve their energy and that sort of thing. And we really pinched that off them in '59 when we should have won the Ashes over there. And
was that when you had the bad officials?
Yeah, that's when. I hope there's no English people in here.
Probably unlikely. There's only 870.
Yeah, but still, and all,
Did they cheat?
Well, the referee that we had in the final test, he dead set cheated, and there's okay. no doubt about that.
Bad luck if you're English.
Yeah, well, a bloke from Stradbrokes over there, the local booking agency, sort of waved to him as he was coming off the field. So, if you think that you've got a suspect there, you'd have to worry about it, wouldn't you?
Just ask the Pakistani cricket team. They wave to everyone in the crowd. Everyone's making a fortune. St George, you're part of the dynasty. There's probably never been a dynasty like it in Australian sport. Unlikely these days ever to be one like it again.
Well, St George, I came from St George, from Newtown. I had a good coach there, and with Dickie Pill. And Frank Facer saw me play one day against St George, and as I come out of the dressing room, he said, "I want to see you, lad." He said, "Up the car park." And I said, "God, what's this bloke want to do?" I said, we lost today, we never won. I got no money in my pocket. And he said, "How'd you like to play with that pack of forwards?" I said, "Frank," "I'd love to play with that pack of forwards." He said, "You'll be playing there next year." And then he came down during the week, and we signed a contract, and I went over to St George, and probably the best move I ever made, insofar as, they were such a dedicated bloody side. Mate, there's a lot of athletes here, but you meet a lot of mugs sometimes, but when you get a dedicated athlete, you can't, if you want to get ahead, you've got to touch him and hopes that some of that, what he's got, rubs off onto you. But what you have to do, it's damn hard work. How he came up and how you learn how he came up and all the sacrifices that he made that you had to make, and then you started to think about whether you want to be a famous athlete or not. But still and all, if you've got that drive in you, you take that advice and you get out there and do it.
Johnny, I just wish 15 years too late that Ted Whitten had been here tonight, because I reckon you and Ted would have gone off and had a beer afterwards and had a mighty fine time.
Well,
I know he was a mate too.
Well, I forgot my trip to Melbourne last time I went out with a beer with Ted.
No. Ladies and gentlemen, the first of our legends tonight, the great Johnny Raper.
Ladies and gentlemen, and to all you other athletes tonight, thank you for making Australia what it is. I really appreciate that.
Well done, mate.
Thank you, John.